Hello. Whoa. Let's see. No. Well, I don't have any audio for you yet, Noah.
Hey, can you hear me?
Hey there, that's better.
Yeah, I got it.
All right, good.
Cool.
Did we get our time screwed up? It said to me that you were waiting.
Oh no, I just pulled it up a few minutes ago.
Oh,
So,
good.
yeah, I just wanted to be ready for when you pulled it up. So
Great.
yeah, well, thanks for taking the time to meet with me and talk a little bit.
Certainly.
Yeah. So just to clarify, so this is recording right now, and then once we're done, it'll pop
It'll
on.
give me a link, and I can share that with you, and you'll be able to get it.
Cool. Thanks.
It
Awesome.
says recording right there on the screen.
Oh, yeah. Yes, I see that. Cool. Well, awesome. Well, then we can go ahead and get started. I'll start just for the purpose of the video with a little intro with the title of the workshop you're going to be doing, and then ask you some questions. And yeah, we'll keep it short and sweet. And yeah, so whenever you're ready. Great. So this is Peter Bane. He will be hosting the full-day pre-conference workshop, Finding, Buying, and Loving the Land, Site Assessment and Land Design for Farmers, Homesteaders, and Land Seekers. How's it going, Peter?
I'm fine, thanks. I just
Great.
got in from a little work outside in the woods. It's sunny, cold, a perfect winter day up here in Michigan.
Great. And what part of Michigan am I reaching you from?
I'll do the hand jive. We're right over here on the west side, just a little north of Muskegon.
Cool. Great. Well, you want to start off by telling me a little bit about your background, how you got into permaculture, what that's looked like, and specifically, maybe more specifically your background in land management, land acquisition, consultation.
Sure. I can give you a couple of thumbnails. I don't know how concise I can be, but you can cut me off if I ramble too much. I got into permaculture 29 years ago, almost 30. I guess 29 years ago. I was living in Hawaii on the Big Island, and I had spent a number of years trying to figure out community in various ways, living with various groups of people, traveling around the country and to different parts of the world, looking for answers to what the challenges of modernity were providing us, and where to put myself. What did I want to be when I grew up, and where did I want to be? And I ran across permaculture at a time when it was expanding. Bill Mollison had just published the Big Black Book, which some people who know the movement know about. And I met a fellow promoting a course, and I took that course, which was the permaculture design course, the basic training, with a couple of Australians, Max Lindiger and Lee Harrison. And that was a life-changing experience, a peak experience, and one that I felt I needed to reorient myself around. So I basically took up trying to find and make a livelihood in permaculture from that point onward. I was fortunate, and at the time I did my course, the fellow who was then editing Permaculture Activist magazine, Guy Baldwin, out of California, decided he needed to retire from journalism and become a garlic farmer full time. So he put it up sort of on the auction block, and I said, I'm willing to do it. It wasn't much of a prize at the time, but it turned out to be a good vehicle for learning, and it carried me through lots and lots of adventures. I did that for 25 years, while I also taught courses and did site design. And about 4 years into my permaculture journey, I took up an invitation from a colleague of mine. Some of your listeners will know Chuck Marsh, who was a leader in permaculture in Western North Carolina for many, many years. Chuck just passed about a year and a half ago. And we partnered to become a teaching team in the Southeast, and he was involved with the Earth Haven community, which is now at Black Mountain. Now I say 20, 5 years in September, I was one of the founding members at Earth Haven, one of the dozen of us that got it going. And I lived there for 10 years, or was in the community for 10 years, and then left it in 2006 to come back to the Midwest. I had aging parents, and so did my partner, both sets of parents up here. And for other reasons, we felt our work needed to be moving away from the end of the road and off grid toward the mainstream. Nothing wrong with what Earth Haven is doing. It's a fantastic laboratory. I learned a huge amount, but I'm moving more and more in the direction of trying to influence the larger end of society. Now, as to what I did that qualifies me to teach these programs for Organic Grower School. We lived at Earth Haven. I did the site planning on 320 acres. I developed 1,500 acres or 1,500 square feet with a tiny house on it in the settlement area of the village. And we gardened it. It was hillside. We terraced it, put in 150 species of plants. When we moved away from Earth Haven and up to Indiana, to the university town of Bloomington, we bought a suburban property with 2/3 acre of flat open ground, and we turned it into a micro farm. And we took the two old houses and we rebuilt them, and took off. So we created edible landscaping and on-site fuel and food harvesting and storage and water storage, ferrocement tanks and underground plumbing and greenhouses and solar panels, and right on down the line. I'll just dangle those in front of your listeners as teasers because there's a lot to talk about. We decided in 2015 that we wanted to move north for a variety of reasons. I'll leave most of them unarticulated right now, but we got motivated to move out of Bloomington and to move into Michigan. And we found, fortunately, a 10-acre property up here. And I have now been at work for nearly 5 years developing it. And each time I've changed scale, I've learned a lot, gained a tremendous amount of insight, and we've worked with some systems consistently. Food production, solar design, and various forms of energy efficient building. So I think at this point, besides those three in a row kind of deep dives into learning what it is to develop a small property, I've worked with 40, 50, 60, property owners, including many in the mountain area, to find and plan the development for landscape, for living on, for homesteading, for farming, and all that sort of thing. I think at this point I can be systematic and offer that to a good range of people, and the Organic Grower School seem to think so too.
Great. So when you are looking at those pieces of land, either in the past for yourself or when advising others, or do you kind of have a list of specific things that you're looking for to buy the right piece of land?
Oh yes. I don't want to pretend that there's a perfect piece of land. I don't think any piece of land is ever perfect. They all have defects and they all have advantages, pretty much. Even something that's not very easy to develop might be quite cheap, so there's something for everyone. But you want to look for certain key pieces. You want to look for locational values, and permaculture is strong in that area. Not only how would you organize it, but where does it sit in relation to the community around it? How's the access? What are the water features? How available is water? Soil's important, but it's less important than most people think. And, some intangibles are often important. I mean, is the neighborhood supportive? Is the area clean? Are there polluters nearby? Are there public nuisances, whether that's a quarry or especially noisy set of railroad tracks, or a highway with nuclear waste moving on it? I mean, there's a lot of things to think about. All of these are potentially factors in Western North Carolina. So, I want people to think broadly about where they settle and what they do, because once you commit yourself to a piece of land, it's hard to extract back out of it. Sometimes you can sell, sometimes you can't. And for homesteaders, there's an often period of several years when you're kind of tied up. Maybe you bought something thinking you'd fix an old house, or maybe you bought something that doesn't have a home and you need to put something on it. Those properties are harder to sell. And until you've got something that is attractive in the real estate market, your capital's tied up. So you'd better be in a good place. You better be doing the kind of thing you want to do, where the community and the landscape and the environment are going to support you.
Great. Talking about those intangibles, do you think one of the best things people can do is just to simply like go to that area, go to that neighborhood, interact with the folks there and get a personal feel for it?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's one approach. You can make discrete inquiries. You can try to assess the factors that matter. People will be different. If you have kids, you're going to be concerned about the schools. If you're an empty nester, that won't be such a matter. Are the roads upkept? Who's keeping up the roads? Is it the county? Is it the township? Is it the city? Are you on a paved road? Are you on an unpaved road? Is there county water or city water, or do you have to put in a well? Is there a well? How do people get along? Is there evidence of conflict? Is there evidence of lack of care? You can drive up and down the roads, count the number of discarded cars you find in the front yard. After a certain point, maybe that's not the place you want to be, or maybe it is, but I wouldn't want to be there. So I'm looking for what's the quality of housing stock. How do people plant flowers or not? Do they take care of their yards? Is it a rustic feel? Are the houses close? Is there a church nearby? There's no one answer, but these are all things to take into account. And then you can begin to talk to people. Stop and say, how long have you lived here? You can find out some of that from property tax records. You can go to the county records and say, okay, when was the last time the property was sold? Do you own? Do you rent? Do you like the place? How are the people around here? What about this property across the road? Has anybody ever been killed over here? Or do you want to, is it a kind of nice place? And the last old lady went to a home and now it's up for sale, that kind of thing. So you can feel it out.
Yeah, but it's specific to each person's needs,
Yeah. I mean, these things are not really that hard if you're willing to, put your ear to the ground. You can pick it up. Sometimes you can even just see it.
Right.
The way people treat the place.
Right.
It doesn't hurt to talk to people.
So kind of like conversely, what are some of the biggest mistakes you see people making when either looking for or buying land?
Well, one thing people often do is maybe buy more than they need. It's hard to manage with low levels of technology and energy investment. It's hard to manage more than a few acres. Like we have 10 here, but 6 of it is wooded, and I can manage it with a chainsaw and a wheelbarrow, really, and a pickup truck. That's not too hard. The other 4, that's a big job. That's a lot of planting. That's a lot of mulching. That's a lot of care. That's a lot of soil building, cover crops, and we're trying to find the right mix of methods to bring it to life. Another problem people sometimes, or mistake sometimes people make, is they want to put the house in a place that's particularly beautiful, during which process they mess it up. It's kind of ironic, but it's like you should build someplace that's not beautiful and look at the beautiful place. And don't go up on the ridge because it's a fire risk and it's hard to get up there every single time. But people do it all the time, especially in the mountains. Keep your access road short. There's a lot of thumbnails that I can share with people, but we can explore more of that, in the workshop.
Yeah, absolutely. Cool. So, say there's a person who's bought their land, they're excited to get started, but haven't really developed their plan yet. Do you have recommendations for how one can go about creating a development plan for their specific land?
Well, I have my professional prejudices. I think people should get themselves informed about permaculture design, either by taking a course, studying, or if time is short and resources better spent in other ways, engaging a consultant, somebody who's already internalized the arts and design. You can do a lot on your own. Depends on your level of familiarity with land and management. But the beginning of any plan would be to assess what's there. So I usually advise people, if they can afford to take a year doing something, but not living on the property all the time, or not, let's just say maybe living there, but not doing major development. Mm-hmm. Go in and just see what it's got to offer you. Watch the animals, watch the plants, watch the weather, write it down, take notes, spend a lot of time walking, watch it in the heavy rain, watch it in the dry periods, try to get a sense. Where is the water? Where are things moving? What are the wind patterns? You'll not get that information from any public resource. You can get average data for the area, temperature ranges, that kind of thing. That's useful. But the exact thing, if you've got a frost pocket, maybe it won't show up until you've been out there on just the right cold November afternoon and it starts to get misty in a low spot, and bam, suddenly it shows up and the frost is there the next morning and you wouldn't have known. Those kinds of things are helpful. And then you want to essay where is, in a more formal way, you want to notice all the slopes. One thing that I really encourage people to find if they're looking for property, and it's important when you have a piece of property, is to where does the land face the south, the sun. You've got a significant winter in the mountains, and over most of the country for that matter. So it really helps to orient the house toward the sun. And particularly in North Carolina, there's a lot of sunshine even in the winter. We miss it up here. That's one difference I notice. We get sun. I had a great day today, but not as many days out of a month. So use the sun. That'll affect the way you crop. It'll affect the way you live, whether the house is easy to heat or expensive. Where is the cold air going to drain, and where will the water drain? All those are matters that you need to map out, make notes about, try to analyze. And then you have to ask yourself, what am I doing? What do I want out of this property? Is it going to be a farm? Is it going to be a home? Is it going to be both? Do I want to have neighbors? Do I want to have other people living with me? Maybe it's grandma, or maybe it's my brother and sister-in-law, or maybe it's the kids. Where will they be? Will we have two houses? Will the houses be conjoined or close? All those, so you have to find the right spots. Find a piece of property that's not too large. It may not have more than one, or it might have more than one building sites. What if you need to know where they are? Those have particular qualities. They shouldn't be at the ridge and they shouldn't be at the bottom. So they're sort of in the middle. And then, are they easy to get to? And what's the slope? And is there flat land around them? I could fill up 8 hours. At least I hope I can fill up 8 hours for people talking about this stuff.
Right. Great.
So you do a systematic plan and then you proceed to develop. And there's a development logic that begins with certain things and ends, doesn't ever end. But, you start with some fundamentals. You push dirt around and you decide on which vegetation you're going to keep, and you manage the water and the access.
Great.
There's a lot of detail in there. I'm glossing.
Totally. Yeah, that's great stuff though, for this. So for either new property owners or seasoned property owners, what are some of the most prominent challenges you see occurring?
Well, the typical two-answer response to almost any permaculture question is it depends. And a lot of it depends on where someone is. I'm, trying to project on a lot of properties that I've seen in the mountains. I would say Distance to markets might be an issue in some areas, and there can be real drainage issues depending on how the land lies, because you have slopes in so many places. There can be a lot of rain runoff when the rain is heavy, and you, I'm sure, have seen plenty of heavy rain in the last few years, right? So flooding can be a risk, and that's something that isn't immediately obvious. You know, you can kind of figure it out. If you go there and it's not raining, well, how will you know? You know, you have to think about it. Development is a costly process, and people often get in not realizing how much they'll have to do to make a landscape actually productive and easy to live with. It can take a number of years, during which time you've got payments and you need income. So managing the challenge of whether you're going to derive any income from the land, how much, keeping at least one day job in the family, in the household, what does that look like? Those are issues that often confound people. They can be ambitious and optimistic, and I think you have to be to take on homesteading in any way, or farming in this day and age. Still, it's a noble calling, but it's still a difficult one. So the level of work that's required, yeah, some of those issues, I guess.
Yeah, great. Cool. So kind of also on that note, how much can a person really realistically change the land? You know, either a place they've lived for a long time, or say they're looking at a property that fits within their price range, but it's not what they see as ideal. But the hope is that, you know, they can shape and morph it into something beautiful in the future. You know, in your experience, to what degree is that possible? And yeah.
Very little change to the macroclimate. You can change microclimate near the ground and around buildings and near vegetation. Very little change to landform. You can, you can flatten out small bumps, and you can fill in small ravines, and you can dam up drainages to create impoundments, water bodies. You can make ponds. These can alter the feel of a landscape. Buildings will change the feel of a landscape. You can remove vegetation more easily than you can put it back. So there are possibilities to change. I mean, you can clear some areas of land. It takes time to grow a forest or even a hedgerow. So one should be very cautious about assessing the trees. I've just come back from several hours of cutting wood in the forest here, taking down mostly dead stuff, before you make major changes to vegetation. So I think you have to basically like the feel of the place. You can augment it, but if it's and I don't mean by that, you find a property that's covered with trash. You can clean the trash up in a few weeks or months.
Right.
But does it just have that, gestalt, that feeling that you want to be there, that it's an interesting place, that the air feels right, that the light is good, that it feels secure and safe and welcoming. Those are intangibles, but you can sense them with your body. And we'll talk a little bit about how to go about that systematically when people come to the program.
Great.
Yeah, I think people need realistic expectations about what's possible. You can make transformations, and I have consistently had people come to me and say, wow, you've done a lot in a short time. Again, several times now, places we've developed. But when you're in the middle of it, it's slow, sometimes agonizingly slow. And if you haven't set your expectations right, it can wear down your morale, and that's your most precious resource.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Is just kind of an aside on that point, when you talk about the ability to kind of change microclimates, is that kind of what you meant earlier when you said the existing soil isn't as important as some people think, where that's something that can kind of be changed with.
Yeah. Of course, you're not going to radically transform soil. If you have sandy soil, as we do here, it's going to be sandy when you're done 20 years from now, if you're ever done. But you can add organic matter and you can make it a lot more resilient to drought and much more welcoming and nurturing of plants. If you have heavy clay soil, you've got the opposite problem. It's never not going to be clay, but it can start draining better and be more friable and easier to put your hands and your tools into and more welcoming to plant roots.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the kinds of changes you can make in soil. And if in a place which is not just devastated or contaminated with chemicals or something, you can transform the soil regime fairly effectively in 3 to 5 years. Like in 3 years, the garden will really kind of start to pop. In 5 years, it'll be humming along
Mm-hmm.
and be very productive. So while you might start out with better or worse soil, it's not the prime consideration. And if you have better soil on one side and poorer soil on the other side of the hill, maybe it's more important what the light is like or how far you have to come in from the highway to get to it. So that's what I mean. And then when it comes to microclimate, like you're trying to make your property more productive and ensure that you have a better conditions for growing plants than raising animals. And microclimate is about recognizing, again, which side of the hill you're on, where the wind comes from, how the light is shaped by the vegetation, how heat is reflected or absorbed. Buildings have microclimates on each side, and they're all different. A small group of trees has a microclimate in it, around it. So you begin by noticing, and then you continue by adapting. Like you might shape the edge of the forest to carve it out more into a sun trap, so that the light coming in is focused and creates a warmer spot. Maybe you need to build structures like a greenhouse or cloches or trellises, or maybe you need to plant a windbreak to reduce harsh conditions and create better ones.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Do you have any current kind of land-based projects you're working on that you'd like to share?
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, I'm growing a 650-foot 4-row windbreak here on our property in Michigan. We planted the first spring we bought the property, and that's been, well, it'll be 5 years in May.
Mm-hmm.
That it's been in there. So some of the trees are taller than me, I'm pleased about. And some of them are just, creeping along, not very big yet. But overall, it's feeling quite different. And I've been building up the soil in that area by running chickens in mobile coops, mobile cages called chicken tractors, up and down. So they'll leave their manure and improve the soil. And I'm seeing results from that. I'm working, just this afternoon, I'm working not only to collect firewood because we heat with firewood, but I'm working in a long-term, like 20-year plan to shape the woods we bought that was here when we moved here. And I now have done an assessment of it, which I didn't at the time we bought, but I have since learned to do and done. And I have an idea that it's tremendously dense with wood. None of the trees is so big they're just awe-inspiring, like the redwoods or some of the giants in the western North Carolina forest, to Mount Pisgah or Joyce Kilmer or someplace. You see trees you can't wrap your arms around with 4 people.
Right.
There are none of those here. But there's just enough, and so many, and 12, 16, 20, 24 inches that it's fine. You can kind of walk through here. There's not a lot of underbrush. There's a lot of wood in there. I have to decide whether I should cut some of it out. That might be better for what remains, make it more productive. So those are kind of decisions I'm enjoying grappling with. You don't get them all the time, and it's taken me a while to be in a position to maybe make them well. Like our neighbor across the road cut his woods last year. Not very well. He's old. He sold it off for a pittance. The logger didn't do very well by him. It's not what I want. So that's the kind of thing. And in between all the complicated landscapes we have here, we're trying to shape to make them more productive. Like we have the orchard planted on half an acre. So it's getting developed slowly. The trays are in, but now we need to do ground covers and improve the soil.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking the chickens will move in there, or maybe pigs next spring if we decide to raise some pigs. Move them around, let them build up the soil. Yeah, that's what I'm working on personally. And I'm consulting with clients in southern Michigan on 200 and some acres who are doing all of that on a huge scale, much bigger than this, and raising sheep and pigs and turkeys and llamas and all kinds of crazy stuff. So, and have wetlands and ponds and are moving and building houses. They're well heeled, thankfully. You know, they can pay for good services, but they're also wonderful people, and they're really learning to be great farmers. So I'm kind of dabbling in a few other pots.
Cool. Well, that concludes my prepared questions. Is there any final teasers or anything for the conference?
Well, this has all been a big tease, right? You know, it's like I drop off the paragraph before you get to the end of it. People are just going to have to turn out.
Yeah, there we
Find
go.
out the rest of the story.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for taking the time to do this.
Of course.
Yeah.
Happy to do it. I'm sorry we got sidetracked and that you rented your door or something. God knows.
Yeah, I'm an arborist, so I jammed it on a big piece of wood. So,
yeah, I know the risks.
Yeah.
I know the risks. Well, take good care of them. That's the only set you get.
Awesome. Well, cool. Well, I'll be at the conference, and I hope to see you
Good.
there.
Good.
Yeah.
I will forward this recording to you when I get it from the Zoom people.
Sweet.
Okay. Thank you, Noah, and good luck.
Take care.
Righty. Bye-bye.